Thank you everyone for joining me for this short webinar today. I'm going to be talking about gender identity. It is an important component of our identities. It's different from sexuality or romantic orientations. It's really its own topic deserving of an entire spotlight. So that is what this presentation is for. It's both also to celebrate Pride Month and also to provide information to increase awareness, understanding, and acceptance. All right, so gender identity has recently become a more popular topic in society, both for better or for worse. Unfortunately, this year we've seen policies introduced in multiple states that aim to make the lives of trans people, especially trans youth, more difficult. The CDC states that trans individuals already face discrimination and other barriers, including when attempting to access healthcare. So these policies are acutely harmful and would worsen existing health outcome disparities. Additionally, we've seen many headlines bringing attention to the unequal burden of violence experienced by trans individuals, especially trans women of color. The Human Rights Campaign reported that 37 trans or gender nonconforming individuals were murdered in 2020, which is the worst year on record. This is a tragic issue which is no doubt tied to stigma, discrimination, intolerance, and even hatred. Not to be all doom and gloom, there is some positive changes happening in society. So in 2021, there are more out trans and non-binary lawmakers and government officials serving this country than ever before. Also, trans visibility has been boosted in the last couple of years due to more inclusive media and also due to the much publicized coming out stories of celebrities like Elliot Page, Demi Lovato, and Caitlyn Jenner. So as we hear more about transgender and non-binary identities, it can be a little bit confusing if you're new to the concept and all the terminology. While the amount of information and terms may be intimidating at first, labels can serve as valuable tools for education and also to empower those who find that a certain label describes their lived experience. So in this presentation, I'm going to go over the basics about gender topics and what you can do to be an ally. So just to start off with a couple disclaimers, I am just one person and the LGBTQ plus community is not a monolith. Everyone's experience and understanding will be unique, so this is just my understanding. Also, this presentation is to serve as a broad intro to the topic. There's many details that I can't cover all at once, so I have to leave out some intricacies. I don't intend to invalidate anyone's identity by limiting what information I provide. It's just a matter of the amount of time I have. And also, as a warning, I do use the word queer to reclaim the word from its negative origins. It's a term that people can decide to use to describe themselves, but not everyone uses it. And it's always an adjective and not a noun. Also, at many points in this presentation, I'll give examples of outdated terms that we should not use anymore, but because some can be offensive or upsetting, I want to just give everyone a heads up right now. And then finally, if you have any questions, I recommend checking out reputable sources such as the CDC, the Human Rights Campaign, GLAAD, the Trevor Project. Not gonna lie, even Wikipedia is pretty good. So to jump right in, I want to start off by talking about the difference between sex and gender. So biological sex is assigned at birth based on the appearance of the infant's genitalia. So this is often binary and usually reflects the chromosomal makeup within the cells. So for females, the cells usually contain XX chromosomes and for males, XY. However, this is not always the case. There are multiple intersex possibilities which result from the developmental environment. Intersex means that an individual has sex traits such as chromosomes, genitalia, or reproductive organs that do not match the typical understanding of one sex or another. Not all intersex conditions include having genitalia outside the typical male-female binary. There's actually dozens of types of intersex variations. It's all very sciencey, and it has to do with genetics and hormones, so I won't get too much into it. Um, as a note, we used to use the term hermaphrodite, but now we do not. The correct term is intersex. And so biological sex, it is completely different and independent from gender. I just wanted to talk about it right now because it is something that many people do understand with the chromosomes, but it is totally independent, so we'll talk about gender right now. So I'll go over two main components of gender, which is gender identity and gender expression. So gender identity is an individual's internal sense of gender. It's difficult to describe what exactly gender identity is because it's an inherently personal concept. It is important to note that gender is not the same thing as personality. Gender identity exists on a spectrum, so man and woman they're not the only options. Someone may identify as somewhere between, as both or neither, as something other than man or woman, or their identity may change and be dynamic. Gender identity can align with someone's biological sex, and it often does. This is called being cisgender. But for some people, the gender identity does not match the sex assigned at birth, and they may identify as transgender. So I really like this picture, even though it's not a perfect depiction. I think it's a really helpful start. Plus, I don't think there's really such a thing as a perfect depiction of something as complex as gender. But so when we say gender is a spectrum, it doesn't mean that we have pink on one end, blue on the other, and a little bit of purple in between. It's really an entire spectrum, a whole color wheel with all kinds of shades and hues and saturations, and someone may fall anywhere in that color wheel. Alright, so transgender means that someone's gender identity does not match with their biological sex assigned at birth. This may include binary trans individuals and non-binary individuals, which we'll talk about in a second. So transgender men, also called female to male or FTM, they were assigned female at birth, but their gender identity is man. And then transgender women, also called male to female or MTF, were assigned male at birth, but their gender identity is woman. So it's important to note that the term you use reflects the person's gender identity. So Caitlyn Jenner is a transgender woman because she is a woman. And we say trans or transgender woman or man instead of MTF or FTM or male to female or those terms because it's a favored terminology. And also, many people will simply call themselves men or women without adding trans to the beginning. And both of those are valid options. It's also important to note that the word transgendered is incorrect. Transgender is already an adjective, so we don't need to add the ed to the end. Transgender is never a noun. More terms to avoid. Transsexual. This used to be the common medical term, but nowadays it tends to have a disrespectful connotation. Also, the terms tranny, transvestite, she-male, he-she, it, those are all definitely considered offensive, so do not use those. If someone's gender identity does not match the man or woman identities, they fall under the non-binary umbrella. So the term non-binary is used as a general term for multiple identities, but some individuals will use the term itself to label their gender identity. So there's multiple non-binary identities like genderqueer, agender, two-spirit, etc. Unfortunately, I can't get into them all now due to the time constraints, but I definitely recommend researching them. And each non-binary person will use that label that they feel most comfortable with to describe their specific identity. And not every non-binary person will use the trans label. So transitioning is when someone makes changes in their life in order to accept and express their gender identity. So this includes social components such as changing your name, pronouns, your clothing, your style. There's legal components like legally changing your name or other legal documents. And then there's medical components like undergoing hormone therapy or surgeries. Transition will look different for each person. Some people may not undergo various aspects of transitioning, but this does not mean that their trans identity is any less valid. Also, please note that it's very natural to be curious about the transition process, but unless you are a medical provider or have permission, it's not appropriate to ask someone about their medical history, including whether or not they have undergone medical transition procedures. If you do want to learn about the details of transitioning, there are many resources available online that will discuss the process both from medical and lived experience perspectives. So the next component of gender, separate from gender identity, is gender expression. So this is how an individual outwardly presents to the world through the way they dress, act, and communicate. So gender expression can be feminine, masculine, or androgynous. Gender expression, like I said, is completely independent from gender identity, so it doesn't have to line up. The term gender nonconforming describes someone whose gender presentation does not match their gender identity. So, for example, a cisgender man may love to wear makeup, but this does not mean he's trans. Or a non-binary person may present very masculine, but this does not mean that they identify as a man. An important terminology note, so cross-dressing is a term that means dressing in the clothing that is associated with a different sex. This is a term that an individual, usually a cisgender person, may decide to use to describe themselves. But it's better that we avoid using the term to describe someone else because it could be considered offensive or it could be incorrect. Also, drag is unrelated to gender identity and gender expression because it's more of a performance as part of a hobby or a career. All right, so one of the most important parts, how to be an ally. So a major part of how to be an ally is handling pronouns respectfully. So people use pronouns that they are most comfortable with, and an important step that we can take is to help normalize pronouns. So things you can do to help do that would be to add them to your email signature, your name, or when you meet someone, you could introduce yourself with your pronouns. It's best not to require people to announce that their pronouns to a group. Like if you're in a icebreaker event and there's multiple people, it's good to avoid having everyone go around and announce their pronouns just in case someone isn't sure or maybe they're not comfortable coming out yet. But it is a good idea to offer that opportunity without the requirement. If you are unsure of someone's pronouns, it's okay to ask them in private. Otherwise, it's generally acceptable to use neutral pronouns like they until you know for sure. However, if someone specifically states that their pronouns are she or he, then it can be seen as invalidating to continuously use they. And if someone has multiple pronouns, then it's okay and even sometimes encouraged to vary your pronoun usage. Another step we can take to be allies is to create a more inclusive environment. So creating a more gender-inclusive environment is important for people who are trans, non-binary, or questioning by removing the emphasis on gender when it's irrelevant. So a big way we could do that is by using gender-neutral terminology. So, for example, instead of saying both genders, we could say all genders or any gender. Instead of saying men and women, we can just say people or everyone. Instead of saying he or she, we could just say they. And even if you're in a formal setting and you would address a group maybe as ladies and gentlemen, you could try using distinguished guests instead, which honestly I think sounds fancier than the old way. And then another step we can practice to be an ally is continual learning. So, all of us, even those who are members of the queer community, can always continue to learn and grow through challenging our assumptions and previous ways of thinking. Some of you may have learned something today that may have been different from what you had thought before. Like maybe you didn't know that there's cisgender men who wear dresses and still identify as cisgender. I recently learned about demigender identities, which was fabulous, and I'm really glad to know about that now. And continuing from that, if there's something that you do not understand, I recommend researching it from those credible sources. And then if you have someone you can ask, like me, you're always welcome to ask. You can reach out if you're still not sure. And then the final step to be an ally is to practice tolerance, acceptance, and respect. So respect everyone's identities, name, and pronoun. Using someone's pronoun can literally be suicide prevention. Also, we should always use someone's chosen name. Using a name other than someone's chosen name is called dead naming, and we definitely want to avoid doing that just because it's not their name. If you do misgender or dead name someone, simply apologize, then continue. A person's gender identity may change over time. It can take a lot of time to understand something as intricate as your own self. So sometimes new discoveries will mean changes, and we gotta roll with those and make sure that we're respecting someone's most accurate identity and most recent identity. And something important to note is that we always use someone's correct name and pronouns, even if we're talking about their life prior to transitioning. So to summarize the main points from this webinar, biological sex, gender identity, and gender expression all exist independently of each other, and everyone will be a unique combination. Next, do not assume someone's gender identity or pronouns. All identities are personal to the individual, and it's not okay to assume someone's identity or ascribe a label based on their appearance. Next, understanding leads to acceptance, so it's important to continue to learn and be open-minded, which of course is true for everything. And then finally, transgender and non-binary identities are not a mental disorder, a trend, or a phase. Transgender and non-binary identities have existed in various cultures and throughout history, so this is not a new development. Multiple medical, psychological, and social professionals and organizations uphold the existence of trans identities as real, not pathological, and valid. And that is everything I have for my webinar today. Thank you everyone for joining me. Of course, I don't expect anyone to be experts just based on this webinar alone, but I hope everyone learned something. Of course, you are more than welcome to reach out to me if you have any questions. If you don't have my contact information, please reach out to the Arizona Oral Health Coalition. If you are a member of an organization and are interested in me presenting this presentation to that organization, I am more than happy to do it. Again, just reach out to the Arizona Oral Health Coalition. And that is it. So thank you everyone for joining me. These are the resources that I use the most in this presentation, so I totally recommend checking those out if you would like some more information about this stuff I talked about. But if anyone has any questions, I can see the chat box, so please go ahead and feel free to put any questions in the chat, and I will try to answer those to the best of my ability. Oh, and as a note, just I wasn't able to include any specific information about like form development or survey question phrasing, just because that's still something I am researching. So stay tuned for that topic. All right. Well, I don't see any questions. I don't want to cut anyone off, so if you do have any questions, definitely just feel free to email the Arizona Oral Health Coalition and it'll get forwarded to me. But yeah, thank you everyone for joining, and I'll see you all around. Now let's see if I can figure out how to end this stream.